election of chair. Can I have nominations for position of chair this morning, please, members?
Yes, I nominate Councillor David Flagg.
Thank you, Councillor Hilliard. Councillor Howe?
Yeah, I second.
Thank you very much. Right. Firstly, before we move into the agenda items, can I ask the clerk just to run through the housekeeping measures, please?
Thank you, Chair. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council's website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chair in case of disruption. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of your nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point at the War Memorial in the gardens opposite the front of the building in Bourne Avenue. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on your laptops. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 2 on this morning's agenda, apologies for absence. Do you have any apologies?
Yes, we've received apologies from Councillor Chris Matthews and Councillor Anne Feiler.
Thank you. Item 3, declarations of interest. Members, do we have any declarations of interest with regards to the items which are on this morning's agenda? Councillor Hilliard? No. Councillor Howe?
No.
Thank you. Protocol for public speaking at hearings. A protocol for public speaking at meetings of the Licensing Subcommittee is included with the agenda sheet for noting. Item 5 on this morning's agenda, application for 5 Ways, 423 Chalmster Road, Bournemouth. I will now ask each participant to introduce themselves and state their role. I'm Councillor David Flagg, elected chairman for this morning's subcommittee meeting.
Councillor Mark Howell, member of the subcommittee. Councillor Paul Hilliard, member of subcommittee.
Thank you, members. And for BCP Council, please.
Sarah Rogers, Principal Licensing Officer, BCP Council.
Sinead Callahan, Clerk to the Committee.
Thank you. Joanne McNamara, Legal Advisor to the Committee.
Thank you. And for the applicant, please.
Good morning, Chair, Councillors. I'm Michelle Hazelwood from John Gaunton Partners and I'm here to represent Marston's PLC.
Thank you.
I'm Steve McMahon, the Area Operations Manager for Marston's PLC.
Thank you.
And I'm Hayley Connell. I am the GM of the 5 Ways.
Thank you very much. Moving on to those objecting to the application this morning, it might be easier if I just read out your names and just recognise that you are here with us. Gabrielle Clayton, thank you. Matthew Rochester, thank you. And I've also had Georgina Howes, but I understand, Gabrielle, you'll be speaking on behalf of Georgina, thank you. And then we have Councillor Simon Bull and Councillor Chris Rigby. Thank you, Councillor Rigby. Before I run through the procedure, please may I check that all persons who have given notice of their intention to speak have been identified, and any person who wishes to withdraw a representation or wishes not to speak has been identified. If there are no comments, I will take this as correct. I will now explain the proposed procedure and order of speaking for the hearing as follows. The licensing officer presents the report. Questions of the licensing officer by all parties, with members of the subcommittee to go first. The applicant will make their application. Questions of the applicant by all parties, members of the subcommittee to go first. Objectors will make their representations. Questions of the persons objecting by all parties, members of the subcommittee to go first. All parties will be given an opportunity to sum up, with the party who spoke last to go first. The hearing will then conclude. The subcommittee will deliberate in private with the legal advisor and clerk present. Notification of the subcommittee's decision will be given within the period of 5 working days, beginning with the day or the last day on which the hearing was held. The notification of decision will include information about the right of appeal as appropriate. I will now ask all parties to confirm agreement on the proposed procedure or make representations. So once again, if nobody makes any representations, I'll take that everybody's agreed. Thank you. Please may I remind all parties speaking not to repeat the information which they have already given in writing, but to expand on their written representations. All questions are to be asked through the chair, and there will be no cross-examinations of party. Just before I ask the licensing officer to present the report, I just want to make note that we have received late correspondence, and that the committee will obviously take that correspondence into consideration. Can I now ask the officer to present the report, please?
Thank you. An application has been made for full variation to the premises licence to approve the updated layout plan reflecting proposed internal and external alterations. In addition, changes to the permitted hours have been requested, and to add the exhibition of film and indoor sporting events onto the licence as authorised licensable activities. Originally, the application was made to extend the terminal hour for the supply of alcohol, regulated entertainment and late night refreshment by 1 hour until 1 AM on Fridays and Saturdays and until midnight on Sundays. The hours requested for the exhibition of films and indoor sporting events was until midnight on Sunday to Thursday and 1 AM on Fridays and Saturdays. Finally, an additional condition has been offered by the applicant to further promote the protection of children from harm licensing objective as set out in the application. 21 representations were received from other persons on the grounds that to grant the application would undermine the licensing objectives. However, the majority of which were concerned about the prevention of crime and disorder and the prevention of public nuisance licensing objectives in particular in the first instance. Dorset Police and BCP Council's Environmental Health Officer also made representations, but following mediation with the applicant, withdrew their representations after agreeing conditions and amendments to the hours requested. In addition, one representation from one of the other persons was also withdrawn. This results in 20 representations remaining. No representations were received from any of the other responsible authorities. 11 PM has now been agreed, and the applicant has amended the application to reflect this for external regulated entertainment, sale of alcohol and late night refreshment. The applicant has also agreed to produce a noise management plan to the satisfaction of the Environmental Health Officer and agreed a condition to reflect this, and that the inner leaf of the lobby doors and windows shall be closed by 11 PM. Additional conditions agreed with Dorset Police relate to SIA door supervisors for England football tournament games, risk-assessed events and New Year's Eve. They've also agreed a condition that polycarbonate vessels shall be used during these events, with all drinks, whether alcohol or not, be decanted at the point of sale into these vessels. As always, should the application be granted and the applicants fail to operate in accordance with their licence and the conditions attached to it, they will be aware that any responsible authority or any other person may request a review of the licence at any time. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Members, do you have any questions for the officer at all? Councillor Hilliard.
Thank you, Chair. So, Ms. Rogers, just to confirm, so point number 4 in the agenda. So, following receipt of representations, so regulated entertainment films restricted to 2,300 hours, so after the amendment, but with retention of the proposed licensable activity of retail sales, 2,300 midweek and Fridays midnight. So that's what we're looking about. So it's not till 1 o'clock, it is 2,300 hours for the whole place to be open, and midnight Fridays and Saturdays.
That is my understanding, is that correct?
Chair, am I okay to explain, or do you want me to do it during submission?
It would be happy because obviously the
So the application is split into two parts. We have internal and external. So the internal request remains as on the face of the application, so seeking 1 o'clock at the weekend, 12 midnight in the week. But in relation to the external area, where initially we sought to mirror, for simplicity's sake, it is now that all licensable activities externally will cease at 2300 hours. Yeah.
Licensable activities. Thank you for that. And Ms. Rogers, just the other point. So, with regards to the external garden, so whilst what do we say? Licensable activities will cease at 11:30, 2300 hours. But could it still be open, the garden, in effect, if people were just there from the pub with no drink, no food, but they're just there talking?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, councillor?
No.
Thank you. I have no questions either. Do you have any questions at all for the officer?
I only have, these are sort of mechanics questions. Firstly, hopefully you've got our written submission and the bundles. And secondly, I think you're going to give us photocopies of the late paperwork that came in. I've got it on my laptop, but I haven't got it sort of handy. Is that possible? Just one copy will do.
Did you need time to digest that information at all?
We received it last night. It was just that I had nowhere to print it, and I do like a bit of scribble.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Hilliard.
Yes, I just remembered another question for Ms. Rogers. So obviously, BCP Environmental Health put a statement in. There was a bit of confusion about reports of antisocial behaviour. Have you had discussions with the environmental health team, and had there been any reported antisocial behaviours? Thank you.
I have not had discussion with them, and there haven't been any reports to me, no.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Moving on then, can I ask the applicant to address the committee in support of your application, please?
Good morning, Chair, councillors. I'm here to represent Marston's PLC, and as you're aware, I have with me the area manager for the premises and also Hayley, who is the designated premises supervisor. You have our written submission and bundle of documents. I am not going to read my written submission, you'll be very pleased to hear. I will reference parts of it as I'm going along and then come back to it in closure in relation to the legal aspects of our submissions. But the bundle I will ask you to flick to every now and then, because I think a picture says more than 1,000 words, and hopefully it'll make my submissions a little bit more quick. So what I'd like to do, if it's okay with you, Chair, is break down the submissions into blocks, talk about my client, Marston's PLC, what the application is about, then deal with the negotiations that we've had with the responsible authorities, police and environmental health, and then move to the comments in the representations, which I've not covered, by answering the points raised with the responsible authorities. But to start with, I would ask you to bear in mind during the course of the whole submission that this is a variation application, it is not a review, and that before you at this point in time there are no representations from the responsible authorities. Those have been withdrawn in advance of the application. So to my client, Marston's PLC is a national firm, a pub company. They do have a number of sites in this area. Currently, they run 1,300 venues across the country, and this premises falls within their managed division. So Hayley, as the DPS, is an employee of Marston's, as is her whole team, and they have a policing system, an internal policing system to ensure good conduct of their premises. So the first point of escalation is the area manager, who frequents the premises on a regular basis, checks that the appropriate standards are being achieved in relation to the general operation of the pub, the quality of the food, beer, but also all the regulatory aspects which the premises has to operate to. That can then be escalated to the regional manager, who oversees that, and then to compliance and the board itself. So there's a very clear structure, and Marston's pride themselves on executing best practice. They have very rigorous internal policies and frameworks, such as training, checking training, due diligence, and all these sort of things. It's called the blue box, and all members of staff have to make sure that everything is in place and it is monitored and checked and supervised. So we have a framework within the business for best practice and good regulatory compliance, and it's very rare that Marston's have issues in relation to compliance with conditions and regulations which are imposed upon them. Turning to Hayley, she is the DPS, and she's the person with day-to-day control of the premises, and dependent on what happens today, conditions imposed, new authorisations granted, it will be for her to execute them on an operational day-to-day basis. Hayley has been at this site for 4.5 years as the designated premises supervisor. She's embedded in the community. She knows her customer base very well. She knows the area very well. She lives literally up the road from the pub, so she is a resident as well as an operator. And she then has a team, as I've said, all employees of Marston's PLC, which comprise of deputy manager, assistant managers, then the bar staff. And in view of the works which have just been undertaken, they've enhanced the kitchen staff. So we've now got a new designated chef, a lead chef, and 2 members of staff live on site. And the important thing about those 2 members of staff who live on site, one has a small family, they have young children. So we need to look after, in the way that we operate this premises, residents around us, and we have people here today, but also people who are resident on the premises itself. Even though they're employees, they have entitlement to a standard of living and life expectations. The premises is going through a change. It has been there, I believe, for 100 years, the Five-Way, and over that period of time has been owned by Eldridge Pope and is now owned by Marston's PLC, and that change occurred in the early 2000s when Marston's bought out Eldridge Pope. Marston's, for a considerable period of time, last 5 years since COVID, have not really done capital investment in their premises. They've been battling the forces of the economy. But in this last year, they have embarked on a significant capital expenditure programme. They've looked at their sites. They've identified that many of their sites are tired. The interiors, toilets in particular, kitchens, not to the standard, what they want for their premises. And premises have been identified for significant cash investment. And part of that cash investment is also part of a rebranding programme. Now, Marston's aren't a company who put big labels on their premises, so we don't have similar things to Hungry Horse, but they do have distinct brands operating within their portfolio of properties. This premises has always done sport. It's always been known for televising the football, and has that reputation for many, many years as a place where you can go and see sport and live entertainment. Therefore, it fitted very nicely into the new concept which they're putting forward, which is grandstand. And I've put into the bundle a couple of pictures of the premises. I'm sure you're familiar with it, out in Charminster, and the new interior. And you can see that actually the interior is very soft. It's nice colour scheme. It's not harsh, but we do have a number of very large screens so that sport can be viewed by people coming to the premises, and it can enhance the offer which it has historically given to a better level, a more modern level, a more sophisticated level. Now, people are sometimes horrified by the size of the big screen in the main area and say, oh, you've moved away from sort of small TVs which would have dumbed down the entertainment. Yes, there is a very big screen, but that comes with technology. And so by putting the screen in, a whole new sound system has been installed. It is a zoned sound system. And that means that the volume of noise at the front of the premises can be completely different to the volume of noise to the rear of the premises. Very important in this case, because of course the rear of the premises is which is close to cheek and jowl with the residents, whereas the front of the premises, if you know Charminster Road, is onto a very, very busy road with lots of other commercial amenities in its immediate vicinity, as well as traffic, buses, e-scooters, etc., all in that area. So the zoning system for the sound is very important. That sound system has an inbuilt limiter capacity, and the sound system, you will have seen a photo, I think, which has been distributed, sent in by one of your fellow councillors, showing a speaker outside. We are applying for regulated entertainment to the external area, up to 2,300 hours. As Nightfall as Day, we would need a facility to provide that entertainment, a speaker. That speaker is actually quite small, it's in the system and can be zoned, and therefore the sound levels of each area can be different. The garden can be a lot lower than the rear of the premises, which can be lower than the front of the premises, and that is all controlled by Haley, but has been set up by Willow sound technicians who've come in and then locked it down on the levels they think is appropriate. I'll talk about EHO in a moment, but that's to give you a feeling for where the £386,000 which has been spent on this premises has gone. Because yes, there's lovely new toilets, there's new flooring and soft furnishings, but the majority of the money in the investment has gone into the tech to make the operation of the premises sit better for the customers, give them a better experience, but also to make sure that the premises sits better in its community and does not impact the amenity of those around it. And that also goes for the kitchen. The kitchen has been refitted and a lot of the capital expenditure has gone into that refit because this premises historically has done very little food, and the push now is to build that food output so that the premises is not just regarded as a venue where sport takes place, particularly football, because we will be televising all different sports. That's the idea of the grandstand back to the 1970s, 80s Saturday afternoon television programme, which showed horse racing, it showed tennis, it showed rugby, it also showed football. So the new kitchen has been installed and significantly enhanced. In our submissions, I put in data about how the enhancement of the kitchen has fundamentally changed the sales of the premises. And over the last weekend, when the premises reopened, we saw an increase in dry sales of 80%. Now, I would acknowledge straight away that the Five Ways last weekend was the new shiny penny, and everybody may have been going there. So what's the reality of this? Well, Marston's have been rolling out the grandstand concept over the last 6 months, and therefore we have now data of 25 weeks of operation of other sites. So there are 8 operational sites at this brand now across the country, and the averaged uplift on food sales across those sites is about 39%. Now, you'll have read the representations and the comments made about, well, food doesn't make it any different. How does food impact the licensing objectives? Food does make a massive difference, because if we're doing a good, strong food offer, which is appealing across the community, cross-generational, we get a wide range of customers through the door. Some of the representation comments talk about groups of young men. And that, I think, may have flown from the previous operation of the premises as predominantly association with football. By broadening that base, we diffuse that situation. Those gentlemen will without doubt be welcome still at the Five Ways. We hope they enjoy their evenings at the Five Ways. But by having a wider breadth of people, you get a different cohort, different behaviours and different attitudes presenting. And it's also very good for the community, but people may feel more open and welcome at the premises. I know Hayley does a very good job at reaching out and is very well known in her community, but this does help and it provides different platforms for the trading of the premises and changing its ethos. And very often, if we're in a difficult trading situation and come before a licensing subcommittee with a premises with problems, one of the first things which is asked for is, can you start a food menu? Can you bring food into the premises? Well, this premises now has an excellent food menu. You've seen them in the bundle. They range from things geared towards the sporting events right through to full substantial meals and special deals across the week. So it does alter the position, and it helps promote the licensing objectives by the way that the premises is overall operated. In relation to families, the Grandstand brand also brings more families in. To one side of the premises are pool tables, and we're seeing a lot of families coming in, especially lads and dads who want to play pool together and have some food. And that can be cross-generational, an older dad and a middle-aged son, or it can be a young dad with a young son. And they're coming in and having that time together, as are families generally. And we've seen across the 25 weeks of operation of the Grandstand format elsewhere, a 10% increase in sales from the children's food menu. We're also seeing a slight tick up in relation to what we would say female drinks and female consumption, but that's a bit gender biased. So we are seeing more families definitely coming into these premises. That says to me, and I would hope you would accept this point, that if we're seeing more families and we're seeing more food sales, these premises are not harsh, they're not aggressive, they are not generating antisocial behaviour, because if they did, those people would not walk through the door. So they are building relationships with the community, and that's one of the key ethoses of Marston's. They are community pubs, but also within the Grandstand format. So one of the big things that the Grandstand operators are now tasked to do is to reach out into their community and support local sports groups, whether that's a junior football club, whether that's the scuba diving club, whether that's the chess club. And you'll have seen in the bundle that there is actually a chess table as part of the fixtures and fittings within the premises, to reach out to groups and support them by sponsorship. So there's money in the budget to sponsor 2 local groups, but there is also the black card scheme. So when you think about, it's like the opposite of a red card in football terminology, but the black card is given to groups who affiliate with the premises. It doesn't give them discounts on drinks. What it does is, if they come in after a game, if they come in to have their committee meeting, they will then be given free chips, big bowls of fries, and discounts and offers. But it's not on the alcohol, it's on food. And it is this idea of people coming together and sharing, the communal, rather than encouraging further consumption of alcohol per se. So that's the essence of the brand. This premises, however, will not fundamentally change in its operation. It has historically sponsored a youth football team. It has historically done lots of different things, and you see in the bundle that there's a photo of an art class which they had running for a period of time. They also have a wide range of bands. So for their opening weekend last weekend, they had Den of Thieves, which is, I would call it a band for all men, because it goes from 60s to 90s to 2000s in its range of songs. They have jazz bands. The photo that I put in is with a lot of percussion and brass instruments. So a wide range. And historically, whilst Haley has been there, they've had live music either monthly, bi-monthly, every quarter. The presence of live music in this premises is not new. It has been happening for a long period of time. The presence of a sporting philosophy, viewing a live broadcast of football, rugby, etc., is not new. It's been happening for a long period of time. And what the premises is looking to do is enhance that, but also carry on doing some of the lovely things they do as well. So they have a Halloween and Christmas children's party, which is free entry. They will continue doing that. They do an Easter egg hunt. For this forthcoming Mother's Day, they've signed up with Breast Cancer UK to do fundraising around remembrance. In conjunction with Marston's, they did Help for Heroes with Razor Glass. So Marston's created special glassware with the Help for Heroes logo on, and money went to them. All those type of things have been happening and will continue to happen. So what are the differences? The application seeks to extend the hours of operation internally until 1 o'clock on Fridays and Saturdays, and that is a change to the current hours. During the course of consultation of this application, I have been in detailed dialogue with both the police, and it is Dorset, not Hampshire, just slightly over the border, and also with your Environmental Health Officer, Andrew Wemyss. We have talked a lot about the current operation of the premises and what these enhancements which are sought may do to the current operation. The police have confirmed to me that they have no list of incidents in respect of this premises which they would say are directly related to the premises or which cause them concern. The police's worry about the enhanced facilities is around the World Cup next year, the level of fervent patriotism that we see around the England team playing. And we've all seen it on the television when England scored, the beer shower and all those type of issues and the difference in behaviour. That was the police's concern, that the premises will be known for the technology that's being installed, and that could generate problems, crime and disorder under our licensed objective, antisocial behaviour. And therefore, you will see that we have agreed with the police to directly deal with that risk, three conditions. The first one being the provision of SIA 1 hour before to 1 hour after England tournament games to make sure there's that extra security and support in the premises. The second, to risk assess door supervisors on high risk events. So that might cover a local derby game, Bournemouth against Portsmouth or whatever. And then thirdly, in relation to New Year's Eve, which is always a very, very busy night. Hayley does her New Year's Eve on a ticketed basis, but there's always people trying to get in, etc., to always have door supervisors. So we've built in the protection and to prevent crime and disorder at the critical times when the risk has been assessed to be enhanced by virtue of the changes we seek. In line with that, and particularly the beer shower situation around the World Cup, an obligation to risk assess plastics, which makes absolute sense. We've then also had very detailed dialogue with environmental health, and the environmental health officers' concerns married with those points raised by a lot of the residents. The fear of increased noise being generated by the external area if it was able to operate until 1 AM and licensable activities to be undertaken in that space up to that time. He confirmed to me that in the last year he had received no complaints, or his department, regarding the 5 ways from residents. And more importantly, perhaps, because that's old trading, when I was speaking to him on Monday, confirming the terms of the conditions, I asked, did you have complaints coming in on Monday morning? Because on Saturday night, we had a band playing in the new format with all the new tech in place, and he received no complaints. So environmental health looked at this application and said, as to the interior of the premises, we don't see a problem with breakout of noise and the new technology coming in. We'd like a little bit of icing on our cake, please. Currently, at Annex 2.2.6, Condition 2.6, it just requires windows to be closed after 2300 hours. We'd like that to be brought to modern standards and have doors and windows. This premises has double lobby doors at all points of entry, and therefore it was agreed that it would always be the inner leaf closed to stop breakout of noise. So we propose in the application, and you'll see it, page 23 of the bundle, an amendment to an existing condition to enhance the protection against public nuisance caused by breakout noise. That then takes me to the big issue, which is the licensing of the external area. When the application was first submitted, I worked to, and it's me who drafted the application, the ultimate dream that Marston's have, vision for this type of operation, which is 1 o'clock for the external area and for internal and external areas to be identical for ease of operational compliance. In discussions with Andrew Wemyss from Environmental Health and having reflected on the content of the representations from the residents and their worries about the external area, but taking into account that there have been no complaints from an external area which is used all year and has been forever, that we should reduce that element of the application. And so, Councillor, this is the element you were querying. We have now amended our application and only request today, as agreed with Environmental Health, licensable activities in relation to retail sale of alcohol, regulated entertainment, we lose late night refreshment, of course, and films externally until 2300, bringing that back. I want to talk about films now at this point, because we do in the application ask to bring in films as a licensable activity. There is no intention to convert this premises to a cinema. There is no intention to have films running constantly at the venue. The reason we want films is in various points. Around events such as Formula One, the premises may screen a film about James Hunt or about the F1 films which have recently been brought out before going into the race, because it's part of the experience for the customers. It will be almost in the background because most people will be walking through the door to watch the racing, but it gives that depth. The second reason is even more passive why we would like films is because Marston's have, as part of their new programme of works, done what they call activations, and this is engagements with other entities. So last year, the Paddington movie came out. Marston's had a licence agreement with the distributor of Paddington Bear movie to be able to show it in their venues. And the Paddington Bear movies and clips and old Paddington Bear cartoons were shown in Marston's venues on Saturday afternoons, Wednesday tea times, so that families could come and enjoy that environment, and then you'd have the ubiquitous person dressed up as Paddington wandering around as well and things like that. But a joyous, non-controversial, lovely experience environment. We cannot do that if we don't have films on the licence. So to fulfil that, and I believe this year the big activation is around Matilda, because the Matilda film's coming out. So there'll be lots of things done in conjunction with Roald Dahl characters and the new Matilda film. So the reason we're asking for films is for that purpose. We are also asking to add on to the licence indoor sporting event. And again, this is not because we're going to change the back of the premises into an ice skating ring and have hockey players on it or anything of that nature. We now have 2 pool tables and a darts board. Hayley has worked hard. She now has a darts team and do you have 1 pool team or 2? And a pool team. They are going to go into leagues. The dispensation around sport in a public house is if you are just playing it for your own personal pleasure. We have to have indoor sporting events as a licensable activity if there is an audience, because we lose the exemption because of the presence of an audience. Therefore, if we are in a league situation and other league teams come and they bring their friends, we have an audience. Marston's work to best practice. To be lawful, we require indoor sporting event. We may also do some charity events where we have little challenges and things like that. But that is the purpose of having indoor sporting event added to this licence, if you are so kind as to grant it today. It is not for purposes to create antisocial behaviour, to create crime and disorder, to create nuisance. The big point which the environmental health officer raised was around managing the external area and potential dispersal from the premises, particularly if a sporting event has occurred or if there's been a ban on. Hayley manages that very well currently. The occupancy of the premises is not going to change. As a result of the works, it remains on the fire risk assessment exactly the same as it was previously. But the environmental health officer felt that there needed to be more engagement around those potential risk issues and to deal with the concerns which have been raised by the residents. And therefore, we have agreed with environmental health an additional condition adding to the licence a requirement for a noise management plan. And within the bundle, you will see that that plan has been produced, and Andrew Wemish, your environmental health officer, has seen it, and he was very content with its content and believes that if followed through, that will support the prevention of prevention of public nuisance. We have drafted a noise management plan in a format which is described as a training document. I've been in this industry a long, long time, and I've written many, many policies. Policies end up in drawers. They become dead documents. So I now, when preparing a noise management plan, create a training document, because then, as part of the training requirements implemented by Marston's on induction, annual refreshers, this document goes into that box, it goes into that folder and is brought out time and time again and worked through with the staff. It doesn't become a dead document. So that is why it's phrased as it is. I have put a caveat in on the second page, obviously subject to whatever you determine today, this document may have to be amended, but environmental health is happy with the content of it and that it would support prevention of public nuisance. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to go through it. I'm not going to take you through page by page, but it recites, it puts into the team's face the conditions they have to work to and what hours they can operate and where. They don't have to go digging out the licence. They don't have to ask each other. It is here for them to read and see. Thereafter, it talks about what causes noise nuisance, the volume of the music, the external area. Who are our weakest recipients? Where can we cause harm? We need to identify these people and have them in our mind. And at the back of the document, there's a plan, and we've put on the nearest noise sensitive venues. And that is where the checks should be undertaken by Hayley or her team. I spoke to environmental health about the nature of those checks. He's happy that they're just by ear. To assess the level of noise, and we did we walked that process last night when I was here. We went up the road and listened to when we could still hear the external area. We walked across the road and got a feeling for that. So Hayley knows what she needs to do in that regard. The premises has invested in a dB meter. It is not of the quality of the environmental health officer, but as Andrew Wemyss agreed with me, it will give parameters, because if you're using the same piece of equipment, whether it's calibrated or not to the highest specification, you will know that when a band's playing at a good level, it's X, and if it goes to Y, you need to tell them to turn it down. So we have the resources in place. The hours for the external area are recited in relation to licensable activities. The premises external area currently has no curfew. So there is no restriction on the period of time it can be used. I discussed that at length with the environmental health officer, and it was agreed that to impose a curfew would be, in his view, disproportionate, because he had no complaints to justify that step with. So that was his position as the environmental health officer. Hayley tells me that she goes out, she monitors the noise levels, she talks to people in that area. And if she feels that the area is becoming too buoyant, she will bring it down faster and close it down quicker and use her team to do so. She's got the ability to alter lighting. there's a speaker outside, she can cut off noise to it by using the zone system. So we have mechanisms to be able to deal with situations if we require. But in discussions with the environmental health officer, it was agreed that that would not be appropriate. He also flagged that by having a curfew on the beer garden, we could then create unintentional antisocial behaviour consequences, because we would have to push smokers to the front of the premises, which is immediately adjacent to the 24-hour bus stop and where the electric scooters are dropped. So we could unintentionally create more problems, a point of conflict, by having smokers more present on the front of the premises rather than keeping them where they are now, not causing an issue, and being managed well. So that's the logic, because I know, Councillor, you were thinking down those lines, which were in the discussions between myself and the environmental health officer and explored very fully over the last 2 weeks. So within the noise management plan, you also have noise monitoring, you have operational procedures for when internal entertainment's being undertaken, dispersal policies, end of evening operational requirements, and then at the very back, a few points about other noise generators, deliveries, waste collection, bottles, bottle drops, which are the most horrendous noise breakout that you can have, maintenance of ventilation equipment, and training staff engagement, making this centre of the operation, not a periphery to the operation. And then you have the plan and a standard pro forma for recording. I have spoken a lot. I just need to go to some of the direct points raised by the residents. Violence is mentioned in a number of the representations. I've spoken to my clients, so you can ask direct questions as to the situations. There is reference to an individual being tasered. That sounds quite drastic and dramatic. An individual did come into the premises. They were refused service because of their behaviour. They then categorically stated they would not leave the premises unless they were removed by the police. So the police were called. The police somehow, and Hayley will give you chapter and verse on this, managed to drop their handcuffs in the car park, and therefore when they were trying to restrain the individual, the only thing they had was their taser. And so the gentleman was tasered and then brought down and removed. And you were told subsequently that he was very well known to them, and we're putting 2 and 2 together, but probably had mental health issues. The second incident of violence referred to in the representations is with an axe. Again, this sounds quite bad. The individual was frequenting the, is it Tunisian?
Lebanese.
Lebanese. I thought I got the Lebanese restaurant, which is just up the road coming towards town. They have a marquee in their back garden where they have part of the restaurant offer. He jumped over the rear wall and ran towards the Five Ways, pursued by various people and the police. He was not a customer of the Five Ways, and indeed the Five Ways supported the police in that investigation by providing CCTV from their 2 external cameras which face onto the external area and captured the whole incident. In relation to litter, I can explicitly tell you that my client does not retail alcohol or drinks in cans. They have a very limited range in relation to bottles. They have a rigorous glass collecting process, and Hayley and her team at close of business do a litter sweep to the side and front of the premises. Hayley told me last night that she always empties the ashtrays outside as part of that end of night checks. And on a morning, particularly a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning, she finds those ashtrays have been used. People do come and loiter around the Five Ways after the premises is closed. It is on the 24-hour bush route. It is a drop-off location for taxis. There are a number of takeaway outlets in the vicinity. We do not say we are perfect in relation to people leaving with our glassware. It does occasionally happen. But what Hayley is going to institute in the summer when the external area is busy is dedicated glass collection teams. So that will be their job going into the external area to make sure empty glassware is removed very, very quickly. But yes, Hayley sees detritus coming after she's cleared up the following morning as well. There is no reason why anybody from the premises would drop litter such as takeaway items, cans or bottles, because it's on the property anyway, and we have a condition stating not to be removed. And we can keep that space clear. But there are other factors involved. In relation to the gardens, and I think I'm going to mispronounce this, Fampu Gardens to the side, we hear and endorse what the residents say. There are problems in that garden. There is a halfway house in the area, and people from that facility do go there. You know that they've been camping there from time to time. As in all places, there is drug dealing occurring. But when Hayley took over this site 4.5 years ago, she saw an uplift in cocaine use very quickly, and she very quickly intervened with those individuals and barred them, lifetime bans. She's an active member of Pub Watch, and she is known to engage with Pub Watch and request bans, whether that's 6 months bans or lifetime bans, and the premises has a zero tolerance in relation to drugs. Do some people take drugs in the 5 ways? I think we would be naive to say they never do. Is it prevalent? No. How do we know that? Because the checks, the toilet checks and the work that Hayley does, but also the police in their discussions with me, and there is no representation before you, did not say this is a premises which causes us concern in relation to drug taking or drug dealing. And I'm sure that they would have, and they would know. They know about these things better than anybody. Sorry, I've dealt with litter. The last thing is parking. I have to make a technical submission on parking. That is the jurisdiction of planning and the Highways Authority. Parking is controlled by yourselves as the council through double yellow lines, parking bays, parking permits, etc. It is densely populated. Lots of people do have cars. Does everybody have 2 cars? Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But there is a level of parking available at the premises. It has 22 car parking spaces. As a result of the refurbishment, the car park has been re-tarmacked. A tree in the corner has been removed so as to facilitate an additional 2 places. There's now also the creation of 2 disabled places. And when I was in the car park last night, I did a quick car count. And as far as I could see, I think there is parking for 23 vehicles in the car park. So for a pub of this size, that is a generous car park facility. Last night, I personally walked the streets to see what the parking situation looked like. So I didn't want to come before you today and say, oh, you know, X, Y, or Z. By the time we'd got 2 houses, 3 houses, up the side streets, beside the 5 ways, there was space to park. Is that the norm? I don't know, but those were my observations last night. My client does have people who are tradesmen, who are customers, but equally, I'm sure there's tradesmen who live in Charminster. The bottom line is, in relation to licensing applications, it is outside of your jurisdiction to look as to parking per se. I hear what the residents say about public safety, but that is slightly distinct and different, and the determination cannot be based on parking alone. And when you look at the representations, virtually everyone talks about parking. So I would respectfully submit, I wonder if this is a moment to put forward the parking issues of the area to you, as opposed to some of the issues coming from the 5 ways. Hopefully, I've touched all the key issues. I could talk further. I don't want to, because you've got the written submission. You've got the bundle of documents. I think the noise management plan is very, very critical. And page 23, where you can see the amendments to the initial application, along with the conditions which have been agreed with the police, resulting in no representation being before you, and the conditions agreed with your environmental health officer, resulting in no representation by the environmental health officer. I have with me the area manager, who knows the site very well. I have Hayley, who knows the site even better, and we're open to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Members, do we have any questions at all for the applicant?
Yes,
Councillor
Chair.
Hilliard.
So I've got a few. So I'll ask the first and then let you join in with some others. So first of all, obviously, it's about the noise, and obviously you talk about high risk events where you're going to have two SIAs, and it's to understand how you make that assessment linked in with the noise. You seem to have with the environmental health, there will be some neighbours who've got monitoring devices.
Right, so clarification on the monitoring devices. Because there's never been any, am I on? Yeah. Because there's never been any complaints into environmental health, the environmental health team have never issued diaries like they usually do, or gone in and put in their monitoring equipment. We cannot walk into people's houses and say, how loud is it in your front room? So what my client's going to do is they're going to walk to their drive and discreetly listen. Can we hear it? Do we think this could impact this closest house? If we think we can hear it at a level which might go through the window and the door, we're going back into the pub and we're going to alter the settings. Tell the band to calm down. Tell the DJ to turn down.
So this is so very. I think there were about maybe 15 points in different directions. So in the night of an activity, staff will be going out and
yes,
doing this.
We've identified 3 points which we believe are the nearest, so most vulnerable, noise-sensitive premises. And if we can make sure we don't impact those nearest noise-sensitive premises, logic would say that we won't impact the others.
Okay, and you talked about the relationship of a general manager with the community. Would you not go out to some people and say, yeah, can you give us feedback? Would you on how did you think? So we got an event coming up this Friday. Yeah. Let us know, and then similarly on this high risk assessment, to ask the question: do you think it's high risk? Do we need security? I would think most Friday, Saturday, by definition of the number of people you hope to come through, you'd need SIA.
If I can answer first on SIA, when we spoke with the police, based on previous operation, the fact that the occupancy is not going to increase, maximum occupancy, the police did not believe on their incident logs and their information as to the running of the premises that SIA would be required every weekend. They believed that there would be certain genuine high risk events. So the normal band on a Saturday, which has been happening anyway for the last few years, didn't tip into high risk. If, I don't know, they managed to get Ed Sheeran to walk through the door, we'll definitely be having SIA. But normal operation, we believe is not going to fundamentally change. But I'll let Hayley talk about her community engagement.
So for myself, excuse me, there's no reason why we couldn't have a community meeting. We can set up a coffee morning, give the residents a chance to come in and have their feedback, and then we can act on anything that's arisen.
Okay, thank you for that. Do you want to come in?
Yes, I mean, my first point is maybe perhaps more for our officer to comment on, but in terms of the dB meter, presumably that would pick up the background noise of the amplified sound, but a lot of the noise would be, for a sporting event, would be created by the actual people attending, in terms of cheers when there's an incident, or just background, you know, high spirits? Is that capable of measurement, and is that measured at all?
I'm not an expert, but I believe that the dB meters can, but a person's ear can also assess that, possibly even better. And then go, like you said to me, that you quite often will go into the garden and say to a group of young men who may be watching a sporting event, come on guys, turn it down. You know, the whole street doesn't want to be involved in this. And that sort of engagement and monitoring by ear or by device is fundamental. But Hayley has historically been doing that, but the noise management plan gives her and her team a framework to work to.
Yeah, I would suggest it's probably going to be quite difficult to go in front of a garden full of people watching the match and say, everybody be quiet.
Hayley, do you want to explain how you deal with those
Yeah,
situations?
I had an incident last night. The pub was steady busy, but there was a group of lads on the pool table, pack mentality, all getting a bit excited after work. I went over to the boys, come on, just calm it down a little bit. Like, it is quite quiet in here. I'm not saying don't have fun, but just tone the noise down a little. And that's generally how I do. I go over with a conversation. I just say, look, come on, guys, like, tone it down a bit. I've got neighbours or other people, you know, I've got other customers in the pub. So that's generally how I deal with it.
Yeah,
Go in
I
and have
can
a
appreciate
conversation.
that can work if you've got a group of lads around a pool table, but if you've got a scenario where you call it grandstands, you create grandstands, the whole point is to give people the impression that they can, you know, they're there to cheer and enjoy a match or such, you know, then they're part of the deal is that they're going to cheer goals, isn't it? And you can't, and you don't know when that's going to happen. You know, it used to be the case that it would never happen in England matches, but it's more likely these days, fortunately. So,
So if I can just interject, that's why the design of the premises and where the biggest screen is located is so fundamental. So the main screen for the grandstand feeling is at the front of the premises. So, and inside, which means that the noise is thrown back into the premises and those people are captive there, and we've got double lobbies all in those spaces.
so that brings me up to my other 2 points, actually, because in that orientation, on this, if you assume, as I did initially in my first question, that a lot of the noise is coming from the people, then they're going to project that away from the premises because they're facing away from the premises. If we go with the idea that actually it's the amplified sound that's creating the noise, the photograph supplied to us shows that the amplified sound is coming from the building and not the screen, because the speaker is on the building, and therefore that again is being projected away from the building.
I think we're talking at cross purposes. So, are you talking about the little speaker, which was the photo which was put?
Yeah, well,
by
that's
the councillor?
all I've been presented with. So I know, yeah, you talked about different zones.
So
But it was unclear whether there would be different zones in the garden, or that just the garden was one of those zones, and that in which case there would just be one speaker from the garden, and I assumed that this would be, you know, the speaker.
Okay, let's then. So, have you in the bundle page? I think it's page 3. There's the photos of the big screen to be in the interior of the premises. So that's the principal grandstand location.
Yeah, I'm not interested so much in what's in the interiors. I'm talking about the outside.
Okay, so on the exterior, there is there 1 or 2 small speakers? 2 small speakers, but those speakers will not necessarily be used during broadcast of televised sporting events, because it will be the screen in the external area which will be the generator of the noise. So those those speakers are linked into the music system. The screen is where the broadcast will take place and has its own speakers down the side, doesn't it?
Yeah, so our sound system's controlled by a Willow system, which is we call zoning it, so we can amplify or de-amplify certain areas, which obviously gives us atmosphere control. So if we want to excite people, you up the atmosphere for the game to download it. So a good example for the garden, we can lower that at a lower pace depending on the day of trade. So like last night, there was a Champions League game on. It's raining, no noise, nothing comes out of that speaker. So, and inside, there's a different level. So we can control that volume anywhere we want. So rather than in the previous system, there was one turn of a noise dial that controlled the whole entire pub on all the systems. So we can control each zone of how we want that level to be zoned in.
But the garden is one zone.
Yeah, it's one
So
separate
you can't
zone.
control you can't have different levels in different parts of the garden. You're dependent on the sounds in the screen reaching every other part of the garden.
Yeah, so that exterior garden on the right is just one specific zone that we can, the speakers come off one level for that one system.
Okay, I've got a couple more questions, but I'll let my colleagues go first.
I'd like to ask a question on the point that we've been discussing. So can you confirm then that you will have a screen in the garden? Is that correct? Am I correct in saying that? Right.
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
So will that screen project audio?
Yeah, it can produce its own audio.
Okay, so my observations is that some of the premises that I visit, they have similar indoor screens and there's no audio comes from them at all.
Yeah.
So you might be watching a football match, rugby match, there is no
Correct.
audio whatsoever.
Yeah, we have that choice, we can do that. So as I said last night or the other night, we just, if it's not, we just have no noise, so it's just visual only. So
Okay,
we have
so-
that control in the Willow system.
So can I ask the question, is this something that you would offer to go on the license in terms of no audio from the screens?
So,
So just to finish on that one,
yeah,
the point is you can have it's not CFAX anymore, it's the subtitles. So you could have the subtitles on the, being projected on the screen, and that would eliminate the noise coming from the equipment wholly.
right. I'm going to sort of do a little bit of a ramble on this because so I get what you say, and I think clients would probably be agreeable if we're talking about the England tournament games, World Cup, whether it's the Lionesses, the Roses, etc. My concern, and this is me sat here as lawyer to Marston's PLC, is I've talked to you about films. So when they're showing Matilda next summer on a Saturday afternoon, and we've got lots of little children sat in that area having a picnic, which is the type of activations they did with Paddington, the screen would not be able to produce the noise. So if we do such a condition, which may be very sensible to prevent public nuisance, can we, as we did with the police, think about where the risk is, but we're trying to mitigate? So I think the risk that we're trying to mitigate is those big football games where we have a very high attendance, and we all, there's no point being naive in this room. There is an attitude that comes to those events of excitement and sometimes I will call it buoyant behaviour, but steps to mitigate the negative outcomes of those games. So, having no commentary, no noise from the speaker, so it's a silent for the big high-risk games where we're going to get a lot of people potentially in the garden. And as your fellow councillors have said, the noise of the cheers, the noise of the people is more than the noise from the screen itself. Then I think that would be probably very sensible. Yeah, I'm looking at my client, he's nodding. However, I would wish to advise my client and ask you.
Can I just interject by saying that, is it something that we can leave to the EHO officer to negotiate with yourselves with regards to timings or you know, the actual, whether it's a film or a sports or a boxing or whatever, as part and parcel of the noise plan. Yeah. Would you be happy with that?
That would be a very sensible solution.
Okay, okay, thank you very much. Any further questions?
And again, just on that point, because again, the monitoring. So even if it is a nice family film in the afternoon, not all the neighbours want to hear that. So the monitoring would have to carry out that as well, because you would hope that it is just within that garden that you hear it, and you don't need it blaring if it is just children, family in that garden. Linking in with the garden, so it wasn't clear where the smoking area is, because I haven't been there probably for about 6 so years, but I thought the smoking area was obviously in the garden. Now you're obviously trying to make it more family orientated or whatever, and people don't want the smoke. So if you can explain, we've got your map, so where the smoking area is designated, please.
Oh, sorry. Onto Charminster Road, front near the junction. What road's this?
Green Road.
Green Road. So that sort of area. Yeah.
So it would be the far corner of the Green Road entrance rather than the far Charminster Road area. Because that, where the TV is obviously where the seating area is going to be.
It's the far end of
the far end.
right. And how is that? So obviously you've got the pathway, the entrance into the garden. So one half, that's where the speed of the TV will be. Is all of that other half of the garden from the pathway, is that all smoking?
Yeah, I mean generally that's where all of our workmen, builders, etc. They gravitate to that side naturally. So that's why we've done the seating plan by the TV.
Okay, so it's no fencing, no to divide it off to keep the smoke away. It's just in the garden and all there. And also talking about security. So you've got one entrance to the garden, and looking at your pictures you sent through, it looks as though you've got a wire mesh fence. So before you only had, I think it was about 60 centimetre wall garden. Have you raised?
Right. So no, there's been no change to the garden for the walls or anything at all in the refurb.
So the only way, in effect, so the gate is only 60 centimetres high, the wall is 60. So we were talking about after 2,300 hours to no activity, no drinking activity or licensable activity in the garden, but people can obviously still hop over a fence. And again, talking about high risk events, potentially if you've got two SIA, one at the main entrance, one at the entrance to the garden, there is another entrance at the front, which potentially people can get into.
There's only two.
So one would generally put an SIA located on each of the double lobby doors, and that the SIA with the lobby doors with the garden area would be monitoring that area. Now the requirement is to risk assess, and it may be that if England get into the final, then they might want free SIA, you know, and that's a decision fact-based and
Yeah,
risk
correct.
assess-based.
So part of your earlier question was around risk assess. So me and Hayley will sit down as a area manager. We risk assess the volatility, what we need to do. So if we know there's a high demand, we step up our requirements. So, you know, some of the things we do in many of our premises, if it's a high risk, we'll have one point of entrance and one exit. So that front doors will be entrance only. The SIA will stand in the garden. That's the only point of exit. Because if you have multiple entrances, it becomes more on a high risk. So a high risk event, we'll assess that, and we'll do accordance to what we see and how we do in multiple businesses.
Just the last point on that, if I may. It was just about the entrances and exits. So on the map, when you held it up, on the right-hand side of the building, I thought there's an entrance, a door there, which obviously leads into the back and the toilets and that hallway.
the fire
Oh, it's
door.
just fire
Fire
door.
door.
And obviously, we've heard in the deputations that glasses, your glasses are found all in the street. So what actually monitoring does happen on a day-to-day? So if, for example, with smoking, no doubt people do go out the front door. Does they get stopped?
Obviously, as soon as I see it, I'm always saying, you're not leaving with that glass. I need your glass back, please. Again, you know, like our representation was saying, there is always going to be an element of some things, you know, you can't stop everything. But so long as we are patrolling and making sure we're doing as much as possible, all of my regulars know not to leave with glasses. On the odd occasion, I'll get the odd glass back from a resident, but I haven't had that in 7 or 8 months. So what we do is I have team, one of the management are always patrolling the floor. We do the garden runs, we do the out the front. And then when we do all that as a figure of 8, when we walk around the building.
Because I've thought as well, this could be an issue. I asked the area manager if he could look back on glass orders to this premises.
Yeah.
And it is no different to any other premises. It's not got a massive glass usage, because I thought, well, that will tell the tale.
Thank you for that. Any further questions, members, at all?
Yeah.
Yes, I have.
Yeah, on doors and access, you mentioned the double doors and the fixing of the internal double doors, but surely the whole point of having double doors is that they're both closed, so that when one is open, the others are more likely to be closed, and that helps keep the sound in.
Agreed, that is the ultimate principle, but the environmental health officer felt that on the basis of not having a history of complaints, adding this extra layer of icing to the cake would give the protection which he perceived was required. So by making sure that one, it stops the funnel ever existing, and yes, then will be.
So what you're saying is previously you could just keep both sets of doors open at the same time without. That seems rather strange to me. Does that apply at any time of night?
Historically, they could do that previously, and it was only it only occurred on very, very hot nights. But now the inner leaf will always have to be.
That seems a bit of I mean, a bit strange to me that we have all these conditions on keeping windows closed, and if you can have the doors open all the time, it seems to be somewhat.
That was exactly what the EH officer says. Why is it windows only? And therefore we negotiated the position on that, looked at the risk, looked at the complaints history, and agreed that a very sensible addition to the conditions on the licence would be to have the inner leaves closed after 2300 as a mandatory requirement.
Yeah, so my final questions revolve around that 2300 time and the transition at that point. The World Cup matches, a lot of them are 9 until 11, essentially. So what would happen if increasingly matches have, extended, injury time for that might take it over that 2 hours, and obviously you've got, in the later stages, you've got potentially extra time and penalties. So how do you manage the fact that you would have to close the garden halfway through a match?
So in discussions with the environmental health officer, and particularly as we draw for next year's World Cup, because we're all now very engaged on 2026, which is going to be one World Cup in a series of however many going forward. But now the draws come out, the timings for the World Cup matches are going to be difficult, I think, for pubs to deal with and for the nation to deal with. And in our discussions with environmental health, this is why we just went to 2300 hours, because actually, even if we'd have maintained a request to you today for 1 o'clock, that wouldn't have answered all the matches for the World Cup for the outside area, because we could get a 2 o'clock kickoff in the morning. So 2300 hours has been pulled back as a sensible time for licensable activities to cease. Today, the government has launched a consultation in relation to how they're going to deal with World Cup matches next year and whether there's going to be a general order of dispensation across the country for England and Wales, or whether your dear officers are going to be flooded with tens. And I think for the World Cup, these are questions which we will have to address once the consultation in 6 weeks is concluded and we all have a better idea of what the government's going to give. But this licence will cut off at 2,300 hours. So if they want extra, they would have to apply for a temporary event notice, or they will have to make sure that they manage their customers' expectations that if it's a 9 o'clock kickoff and it goes to extra time, then the screen will be shut off outside and people will have to come inside, and they'll have to manage their internal numbers on their fire risk assessment occupancy levels so as to enable people to come in. And it may be that we see, and I'm guessing here, crystal ball gazing, but we have to have World Cup matches next year ticketed so as to be able to maintain occupancy levels and comply with fire risk assessments. It's a crystal ball. At the moment, nobody knows what's going to happen.
Yes, but we have to work on the basis of the facts that we know at the moment, don't we? And it seems to me you said that 11 o'clock is a sensible time. It seems to me that 11 o'clock is a problematic time, and potentially means that even the earliest of matches, which are the 9 o'clock ones, would cause you rubbing up against the final whistle at the point that you're required to switch off the screen, and that I suppose that's potentially a public order issue, but also you've got the, as you highlighted, how do you manage the, if it's a good match, everybody's outside will want to go inside to see the conclusion of it. So you really in a situation where you don't gain any additional customers by having a garden, because you're going to have to keep the space internally for those customers to move in at a later stage. Does that seem logical?
If I could interject, I think at this stage what we don't know is what dispensation the government's going to will override the licensing the licenses which are in place. And the license that we've been asked to look at this morning is up to 11 o'clock. So I don't think we should give preference to anything beyond that, especially if the government is going to step in and say, that you can carry on serving alcohol and entertainment till 2 o'clock in the morning only on that date because you're supporting England. So I think
I think what you're saying is we have to ignore the possibility of any dispensation being granted by government.
Yes,
You do. Yeah.
Thank you, Joanne. Right, are there any further questions? Councillor Hilliard.
Thank you, Joe. Just the last question about the reason for the wholesale extended hours. So just to understand, like on a Friday and Saturday night, if you have a live band in, when do they come on stage? When do they have their break? When do they start again? When do they end? In the old hours.
So currently they come in around 7:45, set up, get ready, start 9, finish at 11.
Right.
They literally just do 2 hours.
Okay. And so what's the motivation? Yeah, what's the motivation for extending?
The main benefit is that it gives us more dispersal time.
Yeah.
So if you do have a band which is very, very popular and you've got full occupancy, then on the current hours, Hayley has to bring things down very quickly and disperse of up to 300 people. Whereas she will then have extra time to bring it down and gently let people go. One of the things we didn't say in our submission, and I must admit I forgot, is that they do have the 24-hour bus outside, which brings people into the area, but also can take people away very well. And they also, and I used it last night, have a button in a yellow box that you push, and United taxis come and get you. So they do have that system. I was really impressed by that. But it gives her more time to get dispersal of a full house out sensibly, quietly and mitigate the potential impact on the residents around her. That's the biggest win.
But with regards to the reason for having late live music or recorded music for a longer, certainly live music, not many bands would have more than a 2-hour set. So I can't understand what that.
It's not for the everyday. And if we apply for licensable activity on a premises license, we don't have to use it every day. It's like the films; they'll be used 3 or 4 times a year. Will we have bands playing, or even live music, an acoustic guitar playing, because that's still live, at 12:30? Possibly on the odd occasion, but it gives consistency across the piece of licensable activities. And it also provides for that flexibility, and it also assists in dispersal. You may, in your determination, say, right, we will give you recorded music because you can control that through your sophisticated sound system. We will give you retail sale of alcohol, but we're not going to give you live music. We'll give you late night refreshment because we want people to have cups of tea and the designated driver to stay happy and remain in the premises, etc. Those are decisions in your determination, and we hear what you say. What I would say is this premises has operated well for many, many years. We've got that feedback from the police. We've got that feedback from environmental health. The residents clearly have some points. You know, they have some concerns, and we don't deny that. What we've tried to do is address them in the discussions we've had with the police, with environmental health, and build more protection for the residents in through the noise management plan.
Okay, thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you, members. Legal officer would just like to ask a question.
If I can ask you just to clarify, so you made reference to a reopening last weekend and the food sales going up. Part of your application is to change the internal and external layout of the premises. So when you opened last weekend, have those changes already taken place?
Yeah.
So that part of the licence hasn't been changed?
But that part of the application has no objections against it, so it must be granted today.
I just wanted to clarify, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Do any of the objectors have any questions at all, or would you like to begin your representations to the committee?
I'll come to it.
Yeah.
Thank you. At present, the garden shuts at 10 o'clock. There is no music, so there's been no complaints. So you've been saying that there's very minimal change, but you want to put out music and you want to have people out there, and you're also saying at 11 o'clock when the garden shuts, people could still be out there. So how are you proposing to regulate that noise? What is the level that is acceptable? Because what Hayley thinks is acceptable. Hello, Hayley. I've never met you. I live 4 doors away in your local community.
Stop. Sorry to stop you in mid-flow, Gabrielle, but you should address your questions to me.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's
I'm
okay,
so
not a
sorry.
problem. Not a problem.
But
Okay.
yeah, so how will they regulate that noise? Because obviously Hayley's point of view of what is acceptable is very different for me in my bed when I've got to get up at 6 in the morning and there's people outside making an awful lot of noise.
Yes, I totally accept what you're saying.
So it's like, how is it
Yeah.
gauged? It's somebody's ears, it's not.
Yeah. So, did you wish to address that point?
We can. So, Chair, through you, the basic answer is twofold. First of all, there's no curfew on the licence currently. So Hayley winds down the beer garden many nights at 10 o'clock. But there is no requirement on the licence, there is no condition as to a curfew time. And environmental health believed that having that flexibility for her to wind it down as appropriate has worked in the past and would continue to work further. So he did not put forward that there should be a closure time for the garden area imposed when we were looking at relevant conditions to support prevention of public nuisance. In relation to what one person feels as a nuisance and another person feels as a nuisance, we are setting up a system for monitoring, But as Hayley has said, she's more than happy to engage with members of the community. It's sad for me, sat here as a lawyer, to hear that somebody who only lives 4 doors away, who's had problems, has never felt that they could talk to Hayley or the premises or to the area manager or to Marston's PLC. And these are bridges which need to be built. And maybe one of the very positive things coming out of this application is that those bridges can be built and we can start to have a better relationship or better understanding between the parties. Because to Hayley's benefit, she cannot know if she isn't told.
No, totally accept that. Gabrielle, did you want to address the committee now with your question? Yes, please.
Okay, so my name's Gabrielle Clayton. I live 4 doors up from the pub. I've lived there for 23 years. I've seen it go through all sorts of different stages and changes. The last 4 years have been the best because the garden has been shut at 10 o'clock. The doors have been shut, the windows have been shut. The internal noise, the late licence, none of that bothers me, but the outside noise does. I'm at school all day with children. I have noise constantly. I get to work, I get up at 6, get home at 6:30. Often my driveway is blocked by somebody from the pub, and I just want to be able to use my house and sleep and watch TV without having to worry about the noise coming from the garden. Inside, fine, have your big screens. I think it's brilliant. My brother will love it. But outside, I don't see the purpose. But my main objection is I am a teacher and I'm a primary teacher, and I see lots of children coming into school every day that have had their sleep disturbed. And they are not healthy, happy children. They're not in a position to learn. There are lots of local schools nearby. Lots of us have children. Lots of children walk past the premises. You've got a great big screen that could be showing something completely inappropriate for young children. You've got a bus stop right by where you were proposing to put a temporary bar. So you've got people outside shouting. When people get drunk, their inhibitions go. They shout, they get aggressive. Someone can just look at them wrong and they start fighting. When they're outside in a beer garden watching sport, it's going to be absolute chaos. And I know that the local children are going to find it very, very difficult to sleep through it. So, I mean, children primary school children need 9 to 11 hours sleep. So the garden being open till 11 o'clock does not work for them, not at all, not in the slightest. It impacts their concentration and their learning, and it can have long-term health effects on them. It can make them very ill, it can make them very stressed and anxious. Besides this, it can have effects on, sorry, where am I got to? So it can have effects on how they come into school and how they can concentrate at school. It can cause behavioural problems. And I know the neighbour right next to the pub, her son has ASD. He needs a very organised life. He needs things done in a particular way. He needs his bathroom at the right time. He needs to be able to relax and calm down. Other children need time to do their homework with peace. You're open from 11 o'clock in the morning till 11 o'clock at night. You're proposing for your garden. You could have music on that whole time. You could have people shouting at that time. If there's a football match in later years on at a different time of day, children could be walking past and there could be lots of grown men swearing and very, very drunk in the gardens. It's just not really acceptable. I've looked up a few studies about noise exposure and the psychological stress that it can have on people. And it says quite horrifically that listening to sounds above 85 decibels for more than 8 hours a day can cause hearing loss. So you're putting children's hearing at risk as well as their other general health, and it's really not acceptable. So if you're outside in a seating area and there's people watching football, it says these studies say it's too loud if you cannot hear someone who's 3 feet away. And I think that's pretty standard in a pub generally. So if you're then putting a screen outside and allowing people to drink, that's definitely going to be a problem. School attendance, oh my goodness, schools are absolutely struggling to get the kids in. The government are hammering teachers to get children into school. And these kids, if they're living in an environment where it's so noisy they can't sleep, they're going to oversleep, so they're going to be late, or they're not going to want to go to school. They're going to be too distressed to go to school. So you're just affecting a really big thing. I think you've really not taken into account the local schools. St. Luke's is failing. It's just gone into special measures. Children aren't getting their SATs results. They're not even getting English and maths properly. These kids need safe, quiet environments to live in. They shouldn't have to put up with public nuisance because it's a commercial premises that want to increase their profits. Don't mind what you do inside, but outside it's just not acceptable. If I had a party in my garden every night, I would be in serious trouble. But you are proposing basically that you want this music on till 11 o'clock every night, and it's really just not fair. People drinking alcohol, they leave the premises, Hayley. They do take their glasses. They wee. I've watched a man sat in my lounge with my children and he's got his willy out and weed in front of my window when he's left the pub with a beer glass in his hand. They bring out bottles, they drop them, they smash them. We're always clearing up after them. We're always souping them up and putting them in the bins. We've given up complaining. We can't get through to the police. When we come in, we're often told that there's nothing you can do once they've left the premises. I've had that said to me by your staff before, that they're not your responsibility. So it's a really difficult situation. Don't have a problem with having a pub at the end of the road when it's all internal, but the external stuff is just going to completely and utterly disrupt family life. Inappropriate content, noise pollution, it's going to impact everybody's quality of life. The houses were there before the pub. The houses were built in 1909. The pub was built in 1932. And it was a hotel. It wasn't a pub. It wasn't, the way things are changing. Kids don't want to go into town anymore because it's too dangerous. So you're capitalising on that. Great, good for you. But not outside. Just keep it inside where you can control the noise. You haven't consulted us, Hayley, I'm sorry to say. I've lived there for so long. Not one single landlord has ever come and knocked on any of our doors and said, hi, I'm the landlord. Would you fancy coming down for a cup of tea so we can discuss some ideas with you? During COVID, nothing was put on. There was nothing, there's no community. When you talk about community, you're not talking about us. You're talking about your community, your pub community, which are very different people to the people that live locally. There's nothing on offer for us. There's nothing for us to draw us into the pub. There's nothing to make us part of your community. So really my concerns are about the fact, the children, the traffic. Oh my goodness, on a Friday night when the builders come in, regardless of how many cars the residents have, if you come down in an evening and take a picture when the pub was shut, the road was pretty much empty except for our cars. When there's builders in, they park right up to the corner on the double yellows. Children trying to cross that road. I teach road safety. Do not poke your head out between cars. They can't cross the road. There is not a gap right up to the corner. And then cars come down and you can't pass each other. So you've got people reversing back onto a main road. And it's right outside your front door. You must be able to see it. You've got cameras there. You probably know whose vans they are. So there's all sorts of problems that are just really not healthy. But yeah, it is the concern for children in the vicinity having their lives put on hold. My children going to bed at 11:30 at 11. Well, it'll be later than 11, won't it? Because you're not saying the garden's going to shut. You're serving food till 11, so people could be out there till 12. I don't know. So yeah.
Thanks, Gabrielle. Did you have anything further to say on behalf of Georgina?
Yes, Georgina's typed something for me to read.
So would you like to address the committee, please?
Okay, so Georgina has said in regard to, can I just read what she's written? Is that okay? So she's put response. The licensing subcommittee should give, the applicant, Marston's PLC would like licensing subcommittee to bear in mind that certain parties have refused to disclose their names and addresses and therefore is no evidence before the committee that they are close enough to be adversely impacted. And the response, Georgina's response is, the licensing subcommittee should give appropriate weight to the content of representations, rather than dismissing them solely because the parties have chosen not to disclose their names and addresses. Licensing objectives should not be contingent on the identity of the objector. Concerns regarding noise, antisocial behaviour and public nuisance are capable of being assessed on their merits, irrespective of not knowing who the person is. Furthermore,
Gabrielle, sorry to interrupt, but we've already been given that document, so we are aware of that document. So.
Oh, Georgina said that she'd written this last night.
Yes, and it was.
So you have it.
It was given to us this morning.
Okay, so I don't need to read it.
So thank you very much for that. If I run through the list then, Matthew Rochester, would you like to address the committee, please? No? Okay. That just leaves Councillor Rigby then.
Thanks, Chair. I'll try and be brief because I think you've covered quite a lot of what I was going to say originally at the start of this. So I'm giving this representation on behalf of local residents, a lot of who've already sent their representations in, which you've read and addressed during this meeting. Their concerns were raised directly to the 4 licensing objectives, and I want to thank the applicant as well for engaging with environmental health and the police and starting to make changes already to the original application and accepting some of those. So I do appreciate that. And also, Hayley, as the DPS, I think you're a really good standard of DPS, and I think the committee should know that as well. Haley does run a good pub, engages with Pub Watch really well, and the way that the pub is operating at the minute, like you've heard, hasn't had a lot or many noise complaints because of the way it has been operating. So the main issue which has come up is obviously the noise from the external seating area, and with the proposed installation of the external TV and the speakers being the main bone of contention. You've heard about the location, that it is in a residential area, and it's homes which have always lived in balance with the pub, and there's no one seeking here, which came up in the paper the other day, to try and close down a pub which they lived in harmony for a long time. This is just commenting on the changes to the licence which are wanted. So it's the outdoor televised sport and amplified sound risk, creating sustained noise at times when people should reasonably expect quiet. And I'm asking the committee to ensure that alcohol consumption in the outside area ends at a reasonable evening hour. I currently believe that this is 10 p.m. and there was actually although it wasn't on the original licence, the external area of the pub had a sign or a placard in place saying the garden was closed from 10 o'clock, and that's now not there anymore since the refurb. So I think that worked, and that's why there wasn't a lot of complaints. And I don't think it's unreasonable that similar should be maintained with or without the TV being in place. It could be limited to just daytime hours, and I think the noise management plan is a really good step to have it, and perhaps it does need decibel levels in it. That's something for environmental health and yourselves to agree upon. Prevention of crime and disorder. Again, I think that's been covered with the conditions from Dorset Police, with the SIA being put in place, and the use of polycarbonates, the risk assessments, and then protection of children from harm. Again, I think limiting the outdoor late night drinking and controlling noise will really do that. And I think it needs to be taken into account a little bit more closed than 11 o'clock. I don't think 11 o'clock is probably the right time for drinking and noise to still be outside. And I do know that pubs are under constant pressure to adapt to survive in this industry as well. So it is trying to strike this balance between the needs of the licensed premises and the needs of the residents around that. And I do respect and appreciate that. And it's why we're here today, to try and find this out. A sports style bar like this with outdoor drinking until 1 o'clock, 11 o'clock with the TV screens, great for the middle of town, but maybe not in a residential setting. The applications made reference, and you have as well, to England football matches, and that being coming up quite a bit, and a World Cup being once every 4 years. But it's worth me reminding the committee that Bournemouth are doing very well at the moment in the Premier League. It's very likely that they're going to get European football, if not in the next year, in the next few years. And European football comes with later kickoffs in the middle of the week on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, depending where they end up. And I know myself, I love going watching the football. If I'd had the chance to watch the Champions League match last night, an 88th minute penalty for Liverpool would have had me screaming at the top of my lungs after that went in. So this is the kind of concerns that there is, and what controls can be put in place to that. And like I say, that's not for me to suggest, that's for the committee to go away and think about what levels of quiet do residents deserve in their home, at what time is it appropriate for there to be, I'm never going to say silence outside of a pub, because even with the best management in the world, you're never going to get that. But what is right for the area? Residents, they want to continue coexisting with the Five Ways as they always have. And I just think putting these safeguards in place to make sure that continues. Let's carry on not having complaints, not having noise complaints. There's no point in doing that. So whatever we can do to avoid that at this juncture is probably for better for everyone involved. And that's all I've got to say on it. So thank you very much for listening.
Thanks very much, Councillor. Any questions at all from on the objections side? Whether it's just general or whether it's pointed at any of those that have come along this morning. But
yes, I have one question. Just regarding the use of the garden as a smoking area. Obviously, it just appears to me, looking at the site, that the actual car park is more shielded, and parts of the car park are more shielded from from local residents, because there appears to be a couple of big commercial buildings in the back, and the way that the pub is shaped in a kind of L-shaped. There's the late night smoking might, if you've got to give a smoking area, I don't know the area. I'm just asking the question of whether that might be a more appropriate place for.
The question to the objectors rather than the.
Yes, well, the objectors are very happy to answer that. They are the local residents at the end of the day.
So I think the crux of that was that would it be more appropriate to have a smoking area in the car park rather than in the
The problem with that is that you'd have noise all around then. So my house is this way, the pub is here, so I'd have noise here and here. So that would be my bedroom, and anyone sleeping in the back of the house would also then be. Like recently when the building that was going on in the 5 Ways, they had these painting, they had these mechanical things beeping, and that was in the back, and it went through the whole of the house. So I think the noise there carries worse because there aren't any buildings between it and our gardens. So it kind of.
Are you happy with that?
Yes, I mean, just to be clear, you said it coming in 2 directions. I was considering, my thought process was that you've got a garden with a low wall that, obviously sound is projecting in all directions. If people are talking loudly while smoking out there, I was wondering whether the parts of the car park might, as an alternative, if you were going to close the garden, might be the one opportunity, the better opportunity to concentrate those people.
I think
But it would appear not.
At the moment, they use the front of the property as sorry, I don't know your name, as the solicitor said, the front of the building is on a main road. It's very busy, so if people are out there smoking, it's probably causing less. I mean, to the houses opposite, obviously not, but that's probably the least noise.
Okay.
The easier way, I don't know how to say it.
Thank you for that. Councillor Hilliard, did you have a? No. Okay. All right.
Chair, could I just add on the smoking? If it's in the car park, people have to walk through the front door and then on the road and then right round. There's no easy way out the back of the pub into the car park. So operationally, that would be more difficult. And we agree with Gabrielle that the front of the premises has a lot more background noise just because of the volume of traffic on Charminster Road, which it masks or it becomes part of that noise, even though later on in the night it doesn't.
I think we've got the gist of that it's
Could I
probably not
just-
appropriate.
Yeah. Just clarify then, because there seems to be a significant space by the front door. I'm assuming that the front door there. And do you currently allow people to stand there and smoke late at night? Okay, thank you.
Is it the public highway?
It's on our licensed land, so where the 2 designated areas are on that plans, you see that that's where smoke out there. So as you say, the background noise from the traffic and the buses, there's less of a nuisance than it would be elsewhere. If we put it in a car park, it would be another EHO risk where we have patrons going into a parked area, moving vehicles. When people are out there, it just wouldn't be manageable.
Okay, thanks for that. Are we all done?
So just on that point, so obviously smoking area is now going to be in the garden, but at the current time the garden isn't smoking.
So currently it's been exactly the same before, people smoked in the garden and smoked at the front. So, yeah, so.
No, people smoked after 10.
Yeah, I'm saying people smoke off 10, it's only licensable. We have
Not in the
people.
beer garden, because in the back garden we always play.
Another question, sorry on this.
Excuse me, we need to, it should be based on questions. Because it's the committee that have to make the decision, all right?
Yeah.
So we have to listen to what the applicant says and what the objectors say, and that's so in order that we can make an informed decision. So there should be no cross-examination, sorry.
So yeah, if I could just.
Councillor Howell.
Yeah, so I'm thinking that when people are standing outside the front, they are standing, they're not sitting. And when you're standing, you hang around for less time probably than if you're allowed in the garden. You sit down, you might be there for much longer.
So sorry, but at the front of the premises, there are benches out there that people can sit down. So you know,
There's no
sit or
difference,
standing,
so.
exactly the same at the back. Currently, at the moment, and previously, people do sit or stand down to them, but we designate that front bit. People will smoke all day, like we currently do at the moment. So if you drove past there now, obviously people prefer to sit in the garden because it's a nice amenity than the front where the busy traffic is quite noisy.
So just to conclude this question to the residents, there's really no significant difference between them being in the garden, sitting down and smoking, and them being out by the door, sitting down and smoking.
At the moment, there is, because the garden is shut at 10 o'clock. It's completely shut. The doors are shut. The windows are shut. No one is allowed in that area. They're not allowed to exit the pub through that door. So it encourages people to walk more along the main road. And obviously, when they smoke after 10 o'clock, they have to go out the front of the building. So obviously, the complaints have been lower because we're not being, subjected to extra noise. 10 o'clock, it's not ideal, but we can all live with that. But when you're then saying, the people are going to be in the garden smoking, well, they could be there all evening, couldn't they, until the pub shuts, because they're not going to be able to take drinks out there. They can still use the garden after 11 o'clock. So there's going to be more noise.
But they can't do that.
At the moment, they don't. At the moment, Hayley's shut the garden. For the last 4 years, the garden has been shut at 10 o'clock.
But that's not a licensing requirement.
No, but that's why there's been no complaints. So where they're saying they had no complaints from environmental health, it's because it's worked. There's been no music out, there's been no televisions, there's been nobody out there past 10 o'clock. So there's been no complaints because the noise obviously then is contained, the windows are shut, the doors are shut, and people are leaving through the front of the building onto the main road, not onto Green Road.
Thank you for that. I'll ask the question of solicitor. Why does the premises close the garden currently at 10 o'clock?
I think, well, it's an historic thing, I think, isn't it?
As far as I was aware when I took over, excuse me, I've been told there was a noise abatement notice. Obviously, we've since found that wasn't the case on the licence. So when I got the handover, I just kept it the same.
Okay, thank you for that. Any further questions? Sarah.
I can ask a question. It was, I started to, I was thinking about a question about the polycarbonate condition that's been offered. And then it opened a bit of I was trying to find the answer myself. So looking at the license, the current license has on and off sales. So I was assuming that the alcohol is being purchased from inside the premises to be taken outside for consumption. So then my question originally was going to be, so the polycarbonate, would that just be for external drinkers, or would that be pub-wide in that at the point of sale you're decanting it? Is that going to be for everybody? But then on the plan, I noticed that there is a temporary external bar.
Yes.
So are you asking for the external area to also be included as on sales? Because that hasn't really been made clear in the
Okay, so very answer. The high risk game like the England Games or any SIA plastics, it's easy operationally for us to plastic everything to try and many people spin different pubs. They'll try and give you glass there and then plastic. It's just easier for us to go, right, this is time we kick in the plastic only. It doesn't please everyone, but it's the safety of our team and the consumers, and it makes it very easy operationally. That you just go, there's no glass, just plastic on those occasions.
I understand that, but then that opened up another question when I looked at the application plan with a small external temporary bar on there, but it wasn't clear in the application that you wanted on sales in that area as well, because that obviously now affects noise. You're now having alcohol being sold in that area as well as potentially regulated entertainment.
So the application at J specifies both. So it is to bring in the external area as described, and the external, and then it goes on to confirm that within the application, and we've moved on from this, but it goes on to confirm, so it is within the application, external area limited Sunday to Thursday, 2300 hours, Friday and Saturday to 12 midnight. obviously, in agreement with VHO, we're now asking for approval of 2,300 hours, so it is within the area. The small pop-up bar is not constructed, it is identifying a space when we have these big events, particularly thinking about World Cup next year, where the premises will become busier, and to reduce congestion around the bar area, a small bar will be put in place potentially in the garden in that place. That has a number of benefits. Firstly, it reduces congestion to the interior. Secondly, it gives a point of sale outside, which then brings our body permanently located to the external area, which improves supervision. And when people know that there's members of staff directly looking at them because of its location, that alters behaviours and attitudes. And it also means that we can monitor more closely people leaving the area, as well as having the SIA with their drinks and making sure we're dispensing and decanting, etc., swiftly and sensibly. So that bar is envisaged to be used not every year even, but at points when we have these very, very high intensity occupancy situations, so as to create increased supervision, reduce congestion, mitigate flash spots, and sort of potential conflicts in the premises. And Marston's have seen across the country when they've done the little pop-up bars, sometimes we apply for tents for them, that in these big events, it really, really does help the management control the situation. So yes, the external area is sought to be licensed. That is within the application. Secondly, the use of the pop-up bar is anticipated to be very rare, but it means that if that area is within the licensed area, we don't have to apply for TENS.
Thank you for that. Understood. Members, are there any further questions for objectors? No. In which case, can I turn to the objectors and ask if there's anything that you'd like to say to the committee with regards to your objections this morning that you may have omitted in summing up? No? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Summing up, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors. We've given you a huge amount of information, and I apologise for the length, but I felt we needed to cover a lot of things because genuine concerns have been raised, and Marston's have genuinely come to the table to try and answer a lot of those concerns. So what I would say in close is the overall operation of the premises will be very, very similar. But of key importance to your good selves is that you do not have responsible authorities before you today, and we have gone into detailed discussions with the responsible authorities to construct conditions which deal with the potential risks arising out of the variation. And that is all set out at page 23 of the bundle, and it shows a reduced application in relation to the external area, and it shows, I think, well-worded conditions which promote the licensing objectives of prevention of crime and disorder and prevention of public nuisance. But those conditions are only part of the story. The other part of the story is the noise management plan. And I actually think that document is possibly more important than the conditions themselves, because that gives the framework, the guidance, the training to the team about how to deploy in the premises so as to make sure that they engage on noise and they react to noise. And we have built bridges with environmental health so that if the residents in the forthcoming weeks, and we've got the festive period, which is always a bit weird, but after that, once we get into the normal run of operation, feel that we're punching through background noise more than we have done in the past, or if there are other issues which none of us thought about today arise, then they can be addressed, and that plan is alive. It's a living creature, it's dynamic, it can be amended and altered. So things like DB readings could be put in, things like curfew times could be put in without having to do formal variation of the premises licence, because that document is binding on the premises by reference to it in the condition. And that gives a very dynamic, living approach to dealing with public nuisance rather than a one-liner on a licence which can be forgotten, interpreted in different ways. It gives body to the situation. So I would very much put forward that the moderated application before you, with the support of the noise management plan, should create a situation whereby the amenity of the residents is maintained in its current position. We've heard a lot about the cut-off time for the garden. I think you will probably have your own views, but the view that I would like to put to you is you've got a really, really good DPS. She hasn't had a curfew on her licence, but she's worked out the right time. We're asking for a little bit more flexibility. We're asking for there still to be no curfew on the licence, but the residents and you still have this DPS. And she has thought about the community. She may not have spoken to Gabrielle, she may not have spoken to some of the other people, but she's thought about them in the way she's undertaken her operation. And that position remains exactly the same, whatever happens today. And I think she will continue to do that. So do we need to put more burdens on the licence, which takes me then to the points which I've raised in the written submission from the guidance. And I know you're very, very familiar with 10.10 and 9.42 and 9.43. But I believe that with the work that we've done, and we have worked really, really hard with the responsible authorities to try and get this right, we are at proportionate, we are at necessary, we are in those terms that we're dictated to under the guidance to achieve without overburdening the premises and leaning into the objective, educated knowledge of the responsible authorities, of EHO, of the police, who understand and know how these things work out and what they've received by way of complaints.
Can I ask you to sort of wind up if that's...
I have one more point, and I'm very excited, Chair. I'm very excited because that's my usual spiel, but we have a new bolt on, don't we? Because we now have, and I'll have to read it out because it's not ingrained into my memory about that. We have the National Licensing Policy Framework for Hospitality and Leisure Sectors, which prompted the change to the 182 guidance at point 1.18, which for the first time ever allows you to look at economic growth, regeneration, and the benefit of commercial ventures. So we've got here capital investment of £386,000 in a property in your area, resulting in already 5 extra jobs, resulting in a boost to the economy. And for the first time, I can legitimately sit before a licensing subcommittee and say, it is important now for you to consider that in your determination. The licensing objectives have broadened. The new policy, although a little bit wishy-washy on first reading, brings in a different language. We are in a different landscape. The government have dictated that, yes, we have to balance the needs of the residents and their amenity, but the licensing objectives should now also be looked at in relation to the economic position and the benefit that economic growth brings to that community as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So at this point, I will now conclude the hearing. At the end of this meeting, the subcommittee will adjourn in private with the legal advisor and the clerk to deliberate. The decision will be conveyed to you in writing as explained earlier. I don't know if you wish to say anything about appeal.
Thank you, Chair. The notification will be sent in writing, but just for the purposes of today, there is a right of appeal against the decision. It's an appeal to the Magistrates' Court, and it's 21 days from date of notification in writing.
Thank you very much for your attendance, and I conclude the meeting.